Good morning, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I haven't made a video in a few days because life is just really overscheduled and hectic. I know that I probably say that a fair amount on this channel, but it's difficult to be caring for an elderly parent and homeschooling 4 kids and running a farmstead, doing home improvement projects, and trying to run a small business. So I feel like I'm always juggling too many balls, and I'm definitely consistently dropping at least one of them. So the thing that had to be put on hold a little bit this week was taking a little break from making a few videos and spending a little time focusing on my kids. We spent some of our time and energy playing board games and spent some time with my dad, a little extra time with my dad, and spend some time with my contractor working on putting in an egress window in our basement so that we can actually create a real bedroom for our sons who currently don't have a space of their own. So, because I've been feeling just really maxed out in a lot of ways, I've been thinking a lot about the second principle of permaculture. Now, permaculture, as I say all the time on this channel, is a design system. It is applicable both to our gardens and to our homes and to our society as a whole and to us as individuals. And permaculture has 3 ethics and 12 principles. And those kind of help guide and shape your design and help maximize efficiency and productivity in our designs. So principle number 2 is catch and store energy. And all of the stuff I've been going through the last year, but also just through the last couple of weeks, really has me thinking about this principle. So I wanted to share a little bit about it with you, and maybe that can kind of stimulate you or prompt you to think about how you can apply the second principle of permaculture in your life and in your garden as well. So the second principle is catch and store energy, and it really wraps in and overlaps a lot with another permaculture principle, which is obtain a yield. They're really kind of intricately connected. I mean, everything in permaculture is intricately connected. That's part of the point of the design system, is understanding everything is connected and has an impact on something else. But I tend to couple these 2 principles together, catch and store energy and obtain a yield, because when we're catching and storing energy, that is a yield that we can then utilize later on. So catch and store energy is about conserving resources. It's about taking energy when it is in a usable form, and at a time in which we probably can't use that energy right now, but we know and anticipate we'll need it in the future. So it's about taking that energy and storing it for a later use. It's about taking energy when it's available, taking a resource when it's available, perhaps a sunny day, and capturing that sunshine into a battery bank via solar panels. It might be about taking a resource and capturing the energy stored in it when that resource is in a form that we can utilize. And instead of waiting until that resource is transformed into a state that is no longer useful for us. For example, harvesting apples when they're ripe and storing them appropriately so that they last throughout the winter versus letting them rot on the ground, right? So even when the apples rot, they still release their energy into the system and it's utilized in another way, but not in a way that's particularly helpful for our bellies. So catch and store energy. We are striking while the iron is hot. We are making hay when the sun shines. That's the classic permaculture saying that is tied to this principle. So catch and store energy saves labor and increases efficiency in the system. It is about helping close our system so we don't have energy escaping outside of it. There's a lot of emphasis in permaculture on closed systems because they are self-sustaining and there is no useful material that is lost out of the system, and there is no transportation of waste out of the system as a form of pollution. So it's about using all of the energy and all of the resources that are available for maximum productivity and maximum yield. And it is also about taking a waste stream and figuring out how to turn it into a resource. Again, in permaculture, everything is connected. And so When we are able to catch and store energy now, it has ripples throughout our permaculture system. It has an impact on other places in our system, and it has a positive impact on us in the future because we have stored that energy or stored that harvest, stored that resource for a time in which we will actually need it. So let's briefly talk about 4 areas of our lives where this second principle, catch and store energy, is highly applicable. And hopefully my dog will not bark at the neighbor while I'm going over these 4 topics. He is really tempted. So some of these may be really self-evident and may be, kind of hashed over repeatedly, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'll just mention them briefly. But some of them may be places that you haven't thought about applying permaculture principles, or particularly not this principle. So the first area is the most obvious, and that is out in the environment, in our gardens, on our farms, outdoors where we are interacting with wildlife or domestic livestock in our food production. We can build ponds and swales that catch water for later use, both as an energy source, perhaps if we're using some kind of a water wheel or we are using some kind of gravity-fed process, and just for the water itself as a resource. It's about harvesting food when it has captured the energy of the sun and stored it in the form of calories for us, and harvesting the food when it's ripe and storing it for later use, later consumption by us. It's about building biomass in the soil. When we are taking all of our dead and dying material and we are turning it back into the soil, putting it back on top of the soil and increasing the soil fertility, we are storing energy and we are storing resources and carbon in the soil. You can also use your compost heap to generate heat on its own to heat things like your water, etc., etc. Another area that I think is really obvious and a really good example is chickens and the eggs that they lay. They take and catch the weeds and bugs and seeds in the environment, and they store the energy from those pests and weeds as eggs for us to eat and enjoy later. But then we move from the garden itself, from the outdoor space to our homes. So we can catch and store energy in our homes with things like solar panels, solar cookers, catching the energy of the sun. We can preserve food in our kitchens. We can dehydrate or can or what have you. We can, that's again, intermingling with obtain a yield, but that is a way that we catch and store caloric energy for our future use. Splitting and stacking firewood. This is a big one for us in our home. We have a wood stove. We store the future energy to heat our home with free firewood that we get off Craigslist and that we grow on the property. Because I do coppice my hazel and I use all of my fruit wood prunings in our wood stove. If we can insulate our homes better and design them better so that we have passive solar design and better insulation, we keep them warmer when they need to be warm and cooler when they need to be cool. That's a way of catching and storing appropriate energy. One that I think of that's more domestic is that we can mend our clothes so that we catch and store our energy of our financial energy, our money in the bank. Our money stays in the bank when we mend our clothes, and we keep those worn clothes out of the waste stream. We are really closing the system when we do things like mending. I'm sure there's many others. I would love to hear your suggestions for how we can apply catch and store energy within the home itself. So the third area has to do with social systems, has to do with people groups, our greater society and our family. When we look at how we organize our society, we can apply the principle catch and store energy through all kinds of programs, through investing in all kinds of infrastructure. I think about how Portland has free compost days in which we pool the resources of our community, leaves from city parks, or compost from our yard waste bins, and we catch that energy and that fertility in the form of city compost, which you can go and get for free during compost days. That's a great way to go beyond our home and beyond our own individual gardens and harness, catch, and store energy as a principle. When we set aside public land for parks and preserves, we are catching and storing the energy and the value of those spaces for everybody in our community. Investing in our youth. This is a big one. Obviously, I have 4 kids. 3 of them are teenagers. 1 is a preteen. I think about the youth a lot as the future of our community and just about what their lives will be like in the future, and how when we invest in our youth, that is a great way to catch and store our wisdom, our experience, our encouragement that has a payoff down the road in the future. I think about how I needed to be mopping the floor last night, but I chose, instead of cleaning in the kitchen, I chose to go invest time with my children and play board games instead. That is a great way for me to think about the second principle. So the last area to think about is how we apply this principle to ourselves as individuals. And this can be really challenging. When we talk about the permaculture ethic of people care, that applies to us as individuals as well. We deserve care. And also the 12 principles are ones that we can apply to us and see a benefit from that. So for me, I think about how I've been feeling really, really run down, struggling with not having the motivation to do some of the chores I need to do. I commented in the homesteading women in the Portland area group about how I just don't have the motivation to get out in the garden right now. There was a thread about how other moms are feeling this way, other women are feeling this way. It's really hard at this time of year when you're being taxed from multiple areas and your battery bank is just completely drained. We as individuals really need to take time for self-care so that we are catching and storing energy in ourselves, because we cannot run on fumes. There are seasons to rest and recapture our energy and invest in ourselves so that come spring or come time in the future in which we need to draw on that bank of energy, it is there for us. And I think a lot of us are seeing the consequences right now of living in a really stressful period of human history, but also just a season of life where it's the end of the year, it's the holidays, mothers in particular are highly taxed, and we just have very few reserves. And we're seeing the consequences of that. For me, it means I'm having to drop balls around the garden, on this YouTube channel, around my home. My home is not as neat and tidy as I would like, but I just don't have the energy. So instead I need to just pause and say, I'm gonna continue to run downhill if I don't find a way to capture and store energy so that I can get going again and so that I can be revitalized for the spring. So please think about your motivation, your stamina for the coming year, your drive as you go into 2022, and realize that you are not an endless well that can just pour yourself out forever and ever and ever without needing to be replenished. That's not realistic. I know if you're struggling with motivation right now, consider the downtime of winter as an opportunity for hibernation and replenishment, as an opportunity to catch and store energy in yourself, to recharge your batteries, to take downtime and fill yourself back up with rest and activities that help refill you, help get you going again. Think about engaging in those activities that nourish you and not those that deplete you, because you know that come spring, you're gonna need to draw on the reserves that you have stored up now to keep your closed system going. Spring in a permaculture garden is a very busy time, and we need to look ahead and say, I'm being responsible with the second principle and thinking about how I need to catch and store energy now so that when things really ramp up in the spring, I'm there, I'm ready, I've got the motivation and the stamina. So I just really encourage you to take some time and think about how the permaculture principle of catch and store energy and its cousin, obtain a yield, are both highly applicable, and how you can utilize them in those 4 areas of your life: the environment around you, your garden, wild spaces, in your home, with other people in the community and within your nuclear or extended family, but also with yourself. Think about taking that downtime to store up that energy in yourself and help your closed system truly thrive as you head into 2022. That is really good permaculture in my mind. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you have thoughts and comments, I would, as always, love to hear about them in the comments section. I'll be back tomorrow with my video on my sister channel, Parker's Hausfrau, which I upload on every Friday. Take care of yourselves, and if you're interested in supporting this channel, you can check out ways to do that in the description below. Thanks.